So
Mhm.
for those that are listening, I am speaking to Bazil Meade MBE. That's correct. And just wanted to catch up with you and your contribution to gospel music and what makes Bazil tick. So I'm going to start with your journey, your original journey from knowledge. I know that you're from Montserrat. So tell me a little bit about your journey from Montserrat to the UK. What was that like? How old were you when you came over, and what was that journey like for you?
The journey was scary, terrifying for a young 9 going 10-year-old boy. I lived in a very modest village, community village in Montserrat. So things like, for me, having shoes was a luxury. So if you have a pair of shoes, you wear them special occasions. But life was, the quality that we had was not what you would associate with quality in these built-up countries like London. The quality was the freedom, the type of things we ate. Like, we ate fruits from the trees, straight from the tree. My dad planted food in the soil. I would go with him, my brother and I, because the two of us lived with Dad. We would go to the mountain. You're probably British born, so you might not understand that. But there were certain things like bananas which were planted. There was like eddos, the yams, those sort of tubers that we ate as staple diet grew in certain types of soil.
Right.
So that you wouldn't find them on the plains outside of the house, certainly not in where I live. So most people in the village had what they call a mountain ground that they worked. So you'd go up there at a certain time to plant your provision, wait for them to mature, and you go back up. And so all the boys and the children, the family would do all of this. Very healthy life. We went to the sea to fish, or whatever we caught, we brought home and we ate. It would be cleaned and hung up over the modest stove, the stone cooking area, and it would be smoked from the cooking. So I ate most things. My choir would tell you that I'm like a wild animal myself, because I seem to eat everything. Anything that's put in front of me, I didn't. Yeah, because that's how I grew up. Congaree, you name it, conch, sort of thing that they would turn their noses up. I would be diving in. It's normal. So it was a very healthy lifestyle. So traveling to England, I was very healthy, very strong. Saying all of that, as I've said to people, and all of this is recorded in my biography. I was actually going into the fields to work with my dad. I had my hoe. We were planting cotton.
Wow.
And it shows you that it's not that long ago. I was working as slaves would have done during these slavery days. So families worked. Montserrat was known for exporting lime. But that industry went down and cotton took over. And so the government would allow or give people a piece of land that they would work, plant cotton, and sell it to the government. So that's what we did. And so we all participated. I was there with my dad, my brother. We all had our hoe. We go to the ground, we'll prepare the soil, plant the cotton, go through the whole process, and then we'd pick it and bag it. I had all those experiences by the time I was 10 years of age, coming to UK. So instead of physical work, hard work, I was already into that. So seeing this massive boat that I was about to, travel on, which I had never seen in my life, never been anywhere. Might have seen it traveling in the sea from miles out, but never actually got close to it. So when my dad took me to the jetty, as we call it, and there were a few guys from my village who were also on the same trip, and they were like guardians. My dad would say, keep an eye on my boy for me. That was it. I practically traveled alone, traveled alone as a teen, with my other village associates, who knew me and knew my dad, and they kept an eye on me during the 2.5 or 3 weeks we were at sea. The boat would travel as it did from one island to the next, as they did back in those days. SS Bigono, I still remember the name of the boat. Never forget it. So I came to London, landed at Southampton after being sick, I think, for at least a week. Never traveled on a boat before, so it was foreign territory for me, and I was sick for most of it. I couldn't hold any of the food down. It smelled different, so it reacted, my stomach reacted to it straight away, and of course the motion of the sea and whatever. I was seasick for most of the journey. By the time I arrived to Southampton, I think most of us were very happy to get off the boat. It was in the middle of winter, February. I was dressed as if I was still in Mount Black. I didn't have a coat or anything. So I was freezing. Another planet.
Crazy. Because my mum's from Nevis, and your journeys, she's older than you, but her kind of journey sounds quite similar, because I know that their neighbours in the Caribbean is quite close to Montserrat, so in terms of cultures are very similar. Very similar. And she came over on a ship as well, and she recalls passing through Tenerife and some other places. We didn't find all this out until a lot after. She did an album in, I think it's 2007, and she was interviewed, and that was the first time that I'd heard this story of her journey. I'm sat there thinking, when did it, we've been around all this time, and I never knew that you experienced any of this.
Yeah, you needed to ask the question.
Yeah, I think we just, you just get on with life, and then when people are asking specific questions, she's like, yeah, I did this, and when I first came, I didn't. And I'm like, wow, I think the impact and during this season of Black Lives Matters and Black History Month, and a lot of things being the light shone on it, there's a lot of delving in history that people are kind of bringing home and thinking about the impact that all our journeys have had on this country, and what we've brought to the country as a whole. But in terms of music, because I know you've got different strings to your bow, when did the musical bug start for you? What can you recall when that became a thing for you, music?
Well, the musical side, I suppose many Caribbean children would probably agree, those who grew up in the Caribbean might agree, parcels were sent down each year by those who came to England. And one of the things my mother, because she came first, would send might be something that was a harmonica, because it's easy to purchase those things up here, but it might be quite expensive down there. So a harmonica, she might send that would be a means of just stimulating whatever musicality I had. And my brother, same thing for my brother. But what really got me started up here was when I arrived before him, and when he came, he was a teenager, maybe 16 at the time, and he had to get a job. So one of the first things he purchased was a guitar, because he had learned to play a few chords while he was a Montserrat then. So he wanted a guitar to continue that developing that skill. And I got interested in watching him, listening to him, and he showed me chords, and I started mucking about the guitar when he wasn't on it. And then I was, at that time, the family were attending the New Testament Church of God in Hackney, Cricketfield Road, quite a known church at the time. The minister, R.L. Kennedy, he was a music enthusiast himself. He's a bit of an electronics geek. He was into all that, and he had a guitar. I started showing interest in that, and he saw that I had interest, so he encouraged me to get a guitar, and he would start to teach me how to play guitar, and I eventually began playing with him in church, and that was the music of the church at the time. And I took to it. Yeah, I did it for the duration of the time I was in the church, in that church. And it was in that church that I met a woman who'd become my mentor, which would help to change my life and launch me into the standard level of music that I'm now involved in, choir, gospel choir music. And that was Olive Paris. She became my, she might as well have birthed me. She actually took me aside when she saw that I was struggling as a teenager. I had loads of issues. Family life wasn't good for me, wasn't happy. And I disappeared into Germany, to go to Germany to get away from family, from the home, more or less from my stepdad, who was a violent person to me and was not treating my mother well, and I opposed him and stood up to him, and he came at me, and I just decided I need to get out of here. So this was probably about 16 or 17 years of age I was at the time, and was invited to go to Germany to sell encyclopedias. I didn't think twice about it. I had to...
That's a bit...
yeah. Could you imagine? I had no idea what was it. Well, this guy was telling me the truth, but funny enough, there were 3 of us young guys who had left school. I left school at 15. Had no idea what I wanted to do. And so I was at a loose end and unhappy at home and everything else that was unsettling me. I just took up this this offer that seemed to, it just seemed exciting. It's adventure, and maybe I might earn some money. Encyclopedias. We arrived there for 3. We drove, and I remember it was a Jaguar car. And the 3 of us got in the back, and this guy and his mate in the front. They promised they had everything set up, the American forces, and we were going to be selling these books that they were making good money. And we went to Mannheim in Germany, and nothing these guys said materialized. And I stayed there for a while, and before my money ran out, I decided to sneak out one night. This was after about a week of sleeping on floors and spending what money we had. I decided I'm not going to stay there and run out of money completely. I cannot speak the language. I know no one there. And I decided I need to get back home. So I sneaked out to the train station, found the money that I needed to buy a ticket, train ticket, and rode the train back through Germany, through France, back to the port, and eventually made it back to UK. Made a call at that time to Olive Paris, who by that time had started her own church, and told her my predicament. She said, if you want to come and stay here, where in my house, it was about a 4-bedroom house. I said many rooms, and you can stay here until you decide what you want to do. And that is when my life changed. In terms of learning to play keyboards, piano. She gave me a whole stack of vinyl gospel albums. Shirley Caesar, The Caravans, James Cleveland, Walter Hawkins, Andre Crouch with the original people. Jesse Dixon. Yes. Danny Bell Hall. You wouldn't remember names. You're too young to.
No. Listen, I'm young, relatively young, but I was brought up on all of what you've just said, and I've got, Danny Bell Hall is one of my favorite singers, was one of my favorite singers, and I hold the collection, personally hold most of that collection myself. So I was, although I'm the youngest in my family, I was very heavily influenced by my cousins, my older cousins, who that were a lot older than my brothers. That because there's quite an age difference. My mum's the youngest in her family, so we were quite the younger family within the family. Does that make sense? So my older cousins could technically be my parents. So they were raised on the old stuff, and we used to go around there, and then we were exposed to, you know, all what you're saying, the original Hawkins family and Danny Bell, and you know, all of that. And then as it progressed, we, you know, found music ourselves, and you know, in time with what was going on, bought music. But that is my kind of cornerstone in gospel anyway. So I do know, yeah, definitely Danny Bell Hall anyway. That 1978 album is like one of my favorites.
She used to come over to London. She used to be brought over to London to do fairly regularly, and Jesse Dixon.
Yeah,
these are people that I worked with and sang with back in the days. And the Winans. Now, don't know if you would have remembered or hear people talk about when they first came to London.
I was very young.
They came over.
Born.
I thought it would have been young. They came over mainly for one show, but I think they ended up doing about 5 shows, 5 days at the Shaw Theatre in Euston, London. I remember it because I was asked to MC about 3 of the nights. You know, it was such an amazing response to them. 3 young, great-looking black men. Of course, the place was heaving with young black women from church. They would rush down the front of the stage to get closer, look at the guys and dance, and to get worship and get involved with what was going on stage. So the gospel music back in those days was new. The freedom, the excitement, the introduction to this new American form of gospel. Of course, my involvement with what was going on here through my own church choir, which was a Laterana Pouring the Bible choir, which was the choir of the church that was led by Olive Paris, who was the minister, who was an evangelist in the New Testament church, but she left to follow her own purpose and vision for ministry, and started her own church, the Laterana Pouring the Bible, Laurel Choir. And from that came Kanos, which was the 70s gospel outfit. It was more modeled on the American soul bands, the OJs, the Earth, Wind and Fires, the appearance of the group Sly and the Family Stone. We had that look and appearance about us, and I wanted to do gospel music that was probably more contemporary and funky. So we were quite radical in our appearance and where we were going.
And how was that received? Because I've spoke to different people on this platform, and I spoke about Paradise in the 80s, and you know, at the time, I suppose in the churches, from people that I've spoken to, not a lot of people were very, you know, positive around change. How was Kanos received by church people at the time? I know everybody reminisces now, but at the time, what was the opposition for you as a young musician, expressive?
I think the style of music and the way we were set up, the style of the music was different. I mean, people must also remember that back in like the 60s, I came in 1961. Back in the 60s, a lot of our churches depended primarily on a lot of country and western type music. That's what we had in some of the churches. Which I mean, as I grew older, I was saying, well, you know, this didn't feel comfortable to me. I was in my teenage years, and it didn't feel comfortable. I preferred going to a church where it was hearing calypso, soca, because it's predominantly Caribbean. Back in there, it would be ska and Jamaican music. To me, that was more of a comfort zone for me, because we were culturally celebrating creative, artistic things that came from us. Those are the sounds that were going to connect us to our roots. The country and western was something that we were borrowing from another culture. And as I grew older and became more conscious of the fact that we were not really recognizing or celebrating ourselves through our music, I think that people celebrate themselves. The arts is at this heart of owning your culture, celebrating your culture, because those are things that you do regularly. The food you prepare, you eat, it celebrates your culture. It reminds you of where you're coming from, of the soil that you grew up on, you lived your life, your parents' generations lived. So it was, to me, it's always been very important for us to maintain those parts of our culture, especially in worship.
Yeah.
Where I've always felt that we again are just perpetuating the old slavery teachings that are imposed upon our people by white masters. We worship through their methods. We connect to God only through their methods. Anything that is of Africa or from originated from us is wrong. It's inferior. It doesn't really do the job. So I always had these sort of feelings and attitudes, and I've never apologized for them, never will, because I think that's at the core of my spirituality. I must celebrate who I am.
Yeah, it is who you are. And what doors were opened for Kainos? Because, like I said, I've seen a little bit of footage on YouTube. There's a little short footage on there, and I know that you guys had albums.
Green Belt, I think it was. Yeah,
Green Belt. Yeah. But in terms of what was the time span that you guys were in your heyday? What was that?
Do you know what? We lasted probably no more than 3 years.
Wow.
It was we were talking about it the other day, because we've got a project afoot at the minute talking about Kainos. But it was me, Joe Pitt, and Joel Edwards, and so that will soon be available. We were talking about that. We thought we'd been together. It felt like we had been together much longer, but it's only about 3 years maximum. Wow. But we did quite a lot. I mean, churches, some churches were embracing, let's put it that way.
Okay.
But some were not. I think one of the most memorable events for us, we did a concert in the back hall, not the main church, in Woolsden New Testament Church. I think that might have been one of the most controversial of our concerts from that. The back hall, it was like on was it a midweek or a weekend, but it was mainly for the young people, but you had some of the elders of the church, as they do, they come to keep an eye on to make sure that things don't, that the youngsters are kept in order. And we rolled in with the instruments that we had, and I think that showed that we were not your typical church group. I had my Fender Rhodes. Did I carry my Hammond organ? I'm not sure if we had a Hammond organ, but I mean the top-rate guitars. Gibson, Joel Edwards played Gibson. Derek McIntyre, amazing bass guitarist. We had the top equipment that rock bands would use, that you would see the famous artists using. So we rolled up with these things and started this concert. And it was not like they would normally have in a Sunday service. The songs were contemporary, put a little love in your heart. Get up, my fellow man, lend him my helping hand, put a little love in your heart. So that was a popular pop song. But to us, we felt it was important to share the message of hope, of love of God, using lyrics that were necessarily church, only church. but lyrics that everybody could relate to. And I think that's one thing that stood us out apart, because a lot of people had the view back then, unless you had God and Jesus in every song, it is not right. It don't belong in the mouth of a Christian artist. But we didn't agree with that, and we felt that we were writing original songs as well that were inspiring, were celebrating ourselves, celebrating our relationship with God, but also letting the world out there know that this love is available to them also. But we're doing it in a different way. And we have funky bass lines, funky drummer, which my brother and Derek McIntyre, the rhythm section, they were very funky themselves. Very much they were in the James Brown vein. So you could imagine at the back of this church hall in Willesden, when the young people kicked off dancing, and the elders putting their hands on their mouths and watching what was going on, the style of dancing that they would see on TV.
Yeah.
In Top of the Pops. Because the youngsters just related to what they were hearing. They responded to that. And they were dancing, they were throwing their arms about the place and everything else. And we did the concert, but they were quite happy when we finished.
Yeah, I find that there's lots of groups that, as I say, took the licks for gospel music, like you were saying about saying Jesus in music. I know BB and CC in the 80s, they took licks for that as well, being controversial. Is it gospel? Is it not? Should you be listening to it? But now, I suppose if you go back and you listen to the music now, it's not that, what was all the ooh-ah about at the time? I think every year.
You got to ask the question. Got to ask the question. Paradise they were again similar, very contemporary.
Yeah. They
took it up another level. But they were a great band. They could perform on any festival stage. So like Kanos, but Paradise were a younger group of guys, and they were given opportunities to perform in the main stages of festivals, rock festivals and a jazz festival, because they were a Christian group. A group of Christian guys were musicians.
Yeah.
But they did not sing any songs with the explicit lyrics or anything that was outrageous. They're just sharing the message of Christian message through using different lyrics. And, of course, folk who are programmed in a certain way, the practice of faith has to be using certain words. You cannot use other types of words. You got to dress and look a certain way. You got to walk a certain way. If you don't do all of these things, then you cannot get into heaven. There'll be fire and brimstone coming down on you when you go into church on Sunday morning.
It's amazing how things have changed, though. I mean, I'm trying to tell my young'uns, that, it was difficult, because even in my little time of being here, I've seen massive changes in the way people approach Christianity and the gospel in church. And I've seen the time where lots of things are forbidden, and you look at it now and you think, but why is that? Is that culture? Is that Bible? Is it culture? What is it? But now it's not as, it's not as big, and for the young'uns, I'm trying to explain to them that it was hard. It was. And probably for your generation and the generation between you and me, it was harder. But I've seen things improve. Still not completely there, but it's improved massively to what had gone before. So yeah, I do hear that, definitely.
Yeah. It is. It's a lot easier now. In terms of dress, if you look at the way people dress to go to church, back in the day, to wear a pair of jeans to church, a pair of trainers to church, you would be pulled up about it, because you need to put your best.
Yes, Sunday best.
And for the Sunday best, it was considered God's house, so you need to dress your best. But that kind of put the focus on the outward appearance.
Yeah.
And as we've realized, it really has little to do with your worship, with worshiping God with your heart.
Yeah.
Get your mind focused on the person, the real spiritual being that you're coming to have those moments with. He's meant to be with you constantly, but you set aside a special a few hours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally agree.
And where you give him your time, whether you're dressed in a pair of shorts or in a t-shirt or whatever, should not affect the focus of your worship. But the clothing seemed to have taken quite a big part. I mean, this is not about LCGC, but that's that's what really helped to break the back of the camel for me in the 80s, 80 to 83 onwards, when we started doing TV shows.
Right.
Because all of my choir members came from apostolic churches. There were Trinitarian churches. So the whole mixture. I had nearly 110 members in the early days of LCGC. So everybody came from a different, many of them from different churches, and they had to wear hat. If you're going to be worshiping in any form, ladies wore hat. You do not wear trousers. Trousers is for men.
That's my background, but I hear you. This is, you're apostolic. I'm apostolic, so.
Yeah. Oh my goodness! There you go.
Yeah, so I know all about that. I mean, by the time it got to us, things weren't. It was still there, but it wasn't. People, as I said, took the licks first. So things got as I was getting older. It wasn't as bad, but I do. You can't perm your hair. All of this. There's all of that. All of that.
I told the young, as we began getting more TV, I said to my young ladies, well, look, you can see look at the other people who are invited to perform on some of these TV shows. Can you see how they look? You have got to do something, put a little rouge on your face. I don't quite sure the name of it at the time. I have the blush that I soon learned to, bring up the tone of your skin a bit. Get a little gloss on. They told me they had. I said, you can't wait. You don't want to be blatant and have you thrown out of your churches. Don't wear lipstick. Get something to just make your lips look nice. And as I said, those of you who might struggle a little bit with your hair, because we cannot go on there with our hats and stuff. It doesn't look right.
Yeah. Go
and buy some here, I said. Go buy some. And with, something that styles your face and look good. And they responded and did that. So when we were first seen in TV shows, they went back to the church. They were slated in some churches, not all. Some churches just found it too worldly. Looking good was too worldly. Looking presentable was worldly.
You have to look humble.
Yeah. But, I question whether it really showed true humility by how you dress. It really didn't do it for me. But I mean, we weathered the storm and we didn't change. I think we pushed the boundaries a lot more in terms of jewelry. Just suggested putting a little stud in your ear again. Small steps so that our appearance will look professional. It was all about that. And I think that's what with Kanos and the other music groups that I was involved in, that appearance was also always very important. And we soon learned that through working with the production companies, the TV networks, and all the different professional people we worked with. This was new territory for gospel music. So we felt back then, I felt then it was important for us to look around and see what was looking great without going over the top, but present yourself modestly, but looking presentable and professional. So the music was, as much as the music was pushing boundaries, the look was also pushing the boundaries. We had to bring the two together. You might have fantastic music, but your appearance didn't fit in with the look of the program that you invited on, and things like that. So we learned fast. We had to learn fast how to present ourselves in a professional way. We shouldn't be looking mediocre or looking less professional because we're a Christian group. And I was very conscious of that. Well, we need to look just as good as everybody else, because the quality of our music was brilliant. So we need to match it by the way we appeared and conducted ourselves.
So how did we touched on London Community Gospel Choir, LCGC? How did that outfit start? In how did that become a choir? Because I know in previous conversations, I know I spoke with Daniel Thomas and Wendy Rose, when they sort of joined the choir, and they were saying, as you rightly said, people weren't as forceful in terms of joining the choir at that time, because some churches weren't allowing certain things to go on, or people to be mixing, as you put it. But how did the early bits of the choir start? How did that come about? Well, I know you and others started the choir. So how did that come about?
The beginning was really with the now Bishop John Francis. He was with the Pentecostal Church of the Living God, I think it was a abbreviated title of the church he belonged to at the time. He was in Islington. There was Delroy Powell, who's now Bishop Powell at the New Testament Assemblies in Tooting. There was Lawrence Johnson, who was in the same church as me, the Lateran Upon Revival. He was like the youth choir leader. I was head of music in the church. So I did the senior choir and oversaw the music in the church. So we were the four main people with the ideas that and that's because Delroy had his own choir, John had his own choir. Occasionally we would end up at the same building program or convention, and all three choirs would be there. We would take our turns to sing, and the conversations often just arrived, it would be amazing if we united our choirs. Maybe John had 35 members, I had about 25, Delroy had maybe 55, and so we'd probably have about 100 voice choir, and that number just resonated with us, and we thought it'd be good to have a mass choir, and that's where the idea came from. And we thought it'd be great to come together, rehearse some songs, and invite an audience, and in an evening we find a venue. But the activity that really cemented this idea was when a friend of mine who's no longer with us, he organized a cruise, a gospel cruise to Gothenburg, and just put it out there, and loads of young people arrived on this boat, didn't know each other, but during the course of this 24-hour cruise to Gothenburg and back, people just came together. We had performances on the boat, and introductions took place, and we introduced, I think certainly Lawrence and I were on the trip. I'm not sure if John and Delroy were, but Lawrence and I were, and introduced the idea of having a united mass choir event in London that would celebrate gospel music. I mean, a lot of this, again, these people were from apostolic churches, Trinitarian churches, and other types, other denominations. And everybody just, the majority of them just said, oh, amazing, fantastic. After the cruise, we got back, and people stayed in touch, and we decided to have a meeting at my church in Hoxton. And there we saw about 50 odd people turned up. And that more or less put the idea in place, and the decision was made that we should try and work towards having a concert in London. During that process, there was a program on TV just started, a black magazine program called Black on Black. Again, I don't know if you have heard of that. You remember it?
My time, slightly before my.
Long before you.
Yeah.
The director at the time was Trevor Phillips, who then went on to be the head of CRE and so forth. So Trevor knew of me and got in touch and said, "Look, Bazil, this was like December of '82. We'd love to have a spiritual element." You had Victor Romero Evans. I think he was one of the hosts of the show. His wife Janet Kay. Had other black music artists it was a program that talked about the social side of the Black community, and they would do short videos, what was going on in various areas of Brixton, Tottenham, and so forth, and have some music. And so they wanted to have something spiritual. So I said, would you come on with your group? I said, well, yeah, certainly. I said, I've got a new group of people as well as my own choir, who we are, and we represent the wider Black community, and not just my church. So it'd be great if you said, yeah, well, whatever you want to do. We know, you know, he knew of me at the time and said, come, we'd love to have you. And so we selected a team, and I think it was a small team, it wasn't many of the singers. We went on there, and it just caused such a massive reaction, because people didn't know, were not aware that gospel music of that quality existed in UK. And that just blew up. So that the following Easter, 83, Trevor got in the church with me, and shortly after our performance, said, Bazil, the public reaction is amazing. We'd like to do it again for Easter next year. Can you help us to put it together? So we decided to put the word out and ask artists, gospel artists from all over the country to send in cassettes. I'll show you how long ago that was. And we received cassettes from a group in Leeds. They were invited onto the show. We selected them. There was the Church of God in Christ choir, who were massive at the time, because Matty Moss, Clark, and the Clark sisters were tightly associated to their organization. So they had just had some amazing concerts and performance with Matty Clark and the Clark sisters in the Kojic choir. And John Francis's choir, which was the inspirational choir, which is a shortened version of it, they were invited onto the show. LC Jason didn't do the Easter version, we did the original show. And again, it had an amazing reaction. It was in that show that the inspirational choir were invited. Now, this was controversial. They were invited to sing with Madness, the pop band.
Oh, yeah.
On the Wings of a Dove. I remember, and it was a big hit. It was a big hit. The Madness saw the guys, invited them to sing on the single. And it was a massive hit. So I think there was a little bit of flack for John and his choir, but you know, that went away after a while, I think, because it just brought, again, another gospel choir, UK-based gospel choir, to the fore of the community here in people's faces, and they were awoken up to the fact that there is gospel music from the Black community here in UK. And the standard is good quality, so that you know, the pop bands, the rock bands were inviting the choirs to sing. We had invitations to sing with people like Paul McCartney back in those days, McCartney's albums. Many other pop artists during that time became aware of it and reached out to us. So the music was given a massive leg up back in those days. People didn't realize just how exciting it was for us, because in as much as we were wanting to reach more people, those of us who were brave enough to do it, because I think there are many people, and I often say this to people, you do not follow my example because it might not be for you. I think I need to have a mindset to do what I do the way that I've progressed, and I was convicted that this is what God had placed in my life. And so the criticism was part of the journey. It was part of the thing that I was doing. So it didn't affect me greatly. It would come because it was pushing for change. Much needed change. And it certainly did that. As you said earlier, somebody described it as you guys laid on the barbed wire and we walk over on your back.
Yeah, it's important that people understand that, because, you know, it is important. What do you think are the keys to your longevity? Because I know a lot of people started out with you, or, you know, just after you, but I see that you guys have celebrated over 30 years consistent LCGC, you know, and you're everywhere. You know, what do you feel is the keys to LCGC's longevity in gospel, in UK gospel music?
Mm-hmm. I think that our reach is UK, but we reach far into particularly Europe. Because I've never been to America with my choir. We have never performed in America. And people said to me, why haven't you been? I've always seen Europe. I call it the United States of Europe. Mm-hmm. There are thousands of amazing gospel choirs in America. So why should I be, okay, it's the place where there's a huge market for it. But at the same time, I feel it's important. The only way I would end up there is if I get a properly organized, honest invitation that is properly structured and, not likely to go belly up, because I heard too many stories of that happening. Mm-hmm. Choirs just getting excited. Somebody from with an American accent, tell them they love them out there and say some amazing things. I've never been drawn by that. I like to see the business sorted out properly. So that has never come for me. Mm-hmm. And I focus more on Europe. And whenever I've had invitations from any European promoter or organizer, we tell them what our desires are, what our needs are. Mm-hmm. They comply with that. Then we could do business, because there is a business element to this. It cannot work any other way. I've learned, as I should say, I've learned that you cannot function unless you have that in place as foundation. And so I always insisted on that. Got bitten a few times because I'm dealing with human beings and I'm human, and people will always try to manipulate situations. But LCGC is here. It's a conviction that I hold. I was an amateur winder before I walked out on that job, which was dealing with transformers. I made transformers. I repaired industrial motors. So if you were working in a factory, you had machinery going. Mm-hmm. Repairing those motors was my job. I was self-employed doing that. But it came to a point while I was doing that, one day I was singing, making music in my head, and a song came on the radio, Jennifer Holiday, I'm Not Living Without You, pop song, a soul song.
Yeah.
It just absolutely spoke to me, and it's not a gospel song, but I was in a job that my heart was not in longer, because I was writing songs on the job. I was playing the Hammond organ, I was playing keyboards while I was on the job. It's completely two different worlds. And I came to a point where I decided I can no longer do this job. Mm-hmm. And I got married, I think a couple of years before, started our family. Mm-hmm. First, my mortgage, and all those major commitments. I put tools down, put the motor on the desk, and walked out on that job. Went up to the office, and I announced that I am leaving. I cannot do the job anymore, and I walked out.
You have to jump.
And I absolutely. It took me quite a while before I told my wife at the time, Andrea, that I left the job and couldn't do it anymore. And before long, I turned one of my bedrooms into an office. Mm-hmm. This was in Leighton in East London. And that became LCGC's office, our first office. My then choir secretary would come there, and along with Andrea, they would get files sorted out. And that is how it all began. So my house in Leighton became an open house, because choir members, I had my Rhodes set up in the living room, and a name that many people might remember, Howard Francis, who was our main songwriter, musician at the time. Howard would be in my house every day practicing. He didn't have an instrument at home, so he'd be on the roads practicing and writing songs. And I was loving it because there was Mark Beswick, there was Howard Francis, there was Wayne Wilson, Maurice Smith, my God, Dennis Barrett, our bass player, David Charles, these amazing drummers from back in the 80s, the musicians of LCGC, and a whole host of singers. So people would be in and out of the house. One family, the Beswick family, lived a few, maybe about 5-minute walk away. So they were always in the house. And we were always doing something, making music, trying out songs and so forth. So it was a fabulous time. It really was. It was a fabulous time. But my passion for the gospel, for music, and accepting that this is what God has given to me as my life's purpose, just took over. And in terms of the longevity that now exists, I believe that's it. If I am the head of the organization of the choir, if I have this kind of conviction, I will be motoring constantly. Others will come and go as has happened, because I've had hundreds of members who've come in, they've stayed their term. When they feel like they need to move on, they've done that. But God has always provided people who would come. As I said to people, I am not the choir. I am there's the head person, but the choir are the members who are the family of the choir, and it is they who make themselves available so we can create these amazing moments on recordings and live performances and travel together. We've done some. It would take me many hours to tell you some of the stuff that we've got up to.
Yeah, but there's so many different. There's people that are listening now probably don't realise the calibre of people that have come out of London Community Gospel Choir, that that are doing other things now, professionals, and it was much of a training ground for a lot of people. I have my own memory. I know I spoke to you, I had my early memory in the 80s. I probably would have been about 7 or 7 of my first memory. No, I said I am strange. I'm strange, Basil. I remember things. I remember a lot. And I was talking to my sister the other day, and we remembered that LCGC had come to Manchester, just outside Manchester, and my cousin at the time, we're like sisters. We grew up together, and her auntie was part of arranging this event. From memory, this is all from memory. Arranging this event, we used to stay with her a lot, and myself, my cousin, and another, you might know Sarah Maddox Tucker. Now, we all used to be really close growing up. And LCGC came to Manchester, and they did a workshop. They did a workshop called Elida. And I was saying, before I even started this show, I was talking to my sister about it, and I was like, there's a song that we used to always sing. We learned it was a children's workshop and an adults workshop. And you'll have to dig deep of who was doing the children's workshop, but somebody was looking after the children, and we had to perform in the evening. So they had like choir workshop where everybody was together, and then all the children had their like bit, and then we had to sort of perform what we'd learned. And to this day we still sing that song still, and I realized it was a song written by Howard Francis called There's a Better Tomorrow, and I was trying to look for it. Sing it.
There's a better tomorrow, living away so soon. There's a better tomorrow. Hope I remember the words. Where the Lord will reign. Now that is something for us to hold on to. Don't let it slip away. There's a better tomorrow coming soon. Very appropriate lyrics for
Listen,
now.
when we killed that song for years. When I mean our children's choir at church.
Bring it back, girl.
We sang it. We learned it there. We brought it to our church, and that was our song. we adapted that song for years and years and years. And then, it needs to be recorded. But that's a very, that's my connection with London Community Gospel Choir. There you go. Child, I didn't make it up. People think I make it because I remember I was trying to find the song and I reached out to Becky Thomas. Big up Becky. And she's like, I don't know what you're talking about.
That's why she asked me about it.
Oh, did she ask you?
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and I was like, there's a song. And she was like, are you sure?
Okay.
Are you sure? And I'm thinking, yes, there's a song that I used to sing, and I actually remember the building. It could be, I just remember my, like I said, my cousin's aunt, she was like the head of our youth department of the time. So she was kind of outreach, looking at, we used to do a lot of different things, and she was responsible for that. So I used to, you know, be around them a lot. So we were like, we're going to this thing. And then it was like, yeah, there's so many different people. And that was the first time I met Noel Robinson.
Okay.
He was there as well. But I was a child.
So John Fisher would have been the drummer.
Right, okay.
So Noel and John were my rhythm section. My God, I was Pinky and Perky, I could call them. They were crazy together. They were my rhythm section back for about 10 years, I think 10, 12 years, LCGC.
Wow.
Like I said, there's so many people have been come and serve their time in the choir and helped support the choir's longevity. They carry their mantle, carry the load of it, and enable us to stay the course. And we're still here. We're still here, loving with completely different membership. Back in the early days, the point I'm very keen to make, the choir's makeup was predominantly Caribbean extraction. Right. There was one Nigerian guy, J.U., smallest member of the choir. J.U. was always at the front. He was the only Nigerian member, only African member. But everyone else was Caribbean, Jamaican, Russian, you name it, from various St. Lucia, Guyana. And then we had a sprinkling we had about 3 or 4 white members, English girls, who were there at the time. But now it's the opposite. I think the membership is probably more African based.
Right.
So you've got Congo, Nigeria, definitely in the majority, Kenya. I can't remember some of the islands, but yeah, it's predominantly African with a sprinkling of Caribbean people, to show how our society, our community has changed in terms of the cultural mix and blends. And back in the early days, 60s, when I came here, you could know an African by the look. The difference between Caribbean and African, you can no longer do that until you see their names. Not even when you hear them speak. Until you look at the name, you will not know that people are from different parts, Caribbean or Africa. So there's a lot of intermingling, exchanging. There's a lot of bonding and blending going on of our community. God help us to blend our strengths as opposed to other things, the superficial things. We need to blend together, bond together, and become a strong force within this particular country, so that we can have some proper recognition here as a people.